Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Osseo gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Osseo's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Osseo. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. Mobile hunters, our buddies over at Tethered are always innovating to keep us more mobile and in the game when it counts. From the Tethered One Sticks, the Fast Pack, to the Ultra Lock saddle, Tethered is always designing to increase comfort and utility while reducing bulk, weight, and fiddle factor of mobile hunting gear. And now, they've outdone themselves yet again by creating the carbon fiber forged Predator CFX platform, the latest fully featured mobile saddle platform that raises the bar for what's possible in mobile hunting gear. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old tree climbing veteran, go to tetherednation.com for all your saddle hunting gear. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I got my brother from another mother on, Mr. Dan Nine Fingers Johnson. What's going on, buddy?
Not too much, man. Just living that dad life.
Yeah, nice. You got the crust wiped out of your eyes yet? Well, he and I are on the morning record this morning before work.
Yeah, so there's a window in the morning. Well, I tell you what. When you said, "Hey, let's do 7," I can do 7 in the morning, or I can do 8 or something. I'm like, hey, this is an opening for me to not have to do anything this morning, because if I was downstairs, I'd be making breakfast. I'd be getting kids ready for school. And now that kind of falls on my wife this morning. And I am able to dodge my fatherly responsibilities and chat with you.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I'm glad I could be of assistance.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. My wife was on, well, it's a little different for us now, right? Because my daughter's 15. She's going to be 16 this September, which is just like crazy, man. Like, she's going to be a junior. This coming fall, she'll be a junior. So like, college is a thing now. She's got an actual boyfriend now, which sucks. Yeah, dude. I know, man. Like, I mean, he seems like a good kid. Like, I met him for the first time. They had off on Monday for Easter, for Easter Monday. And so, I was obviously giving her a hard time. I was like, I'm going to clean my guns when he comes over. Like, this, that's the other, And so she, kept asking, and I was like, all right. I was like, she's like, can I go over to his house? I was like, look, you're not going over to people's houses that I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know his parents. Like, that shit's not happening. So she's like, can he come over? And I was like, sure. I work from home, so I'm home all day, whatever. I was like, he can come over. So he comes over, and I was on a call, and I heard him downstairs, like, talking, watching TV and stuff. And so I have my longbow is usually laying on like this dresser, or it's actually like a fold up bed thing behind me. And then I can run outside and shoot some arrows, like whenever I have some breaks during the day, or if I just need some fresh air or whatever. And I have a target downstairs in my archery room. So I was like, you know what? I can't just walk downstairs and be like, hey kid, like, you know what I mean? Like, who are you?
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like I need to have a purpose. I was like, so I grabbed my longbow, and I was like, I'm gonna just go downstairs and shoot some arrows. And I didn't even think about it. I was like, but I'm carrying a weapon around to go meet this kid, Yeah. And I met him. He seems like a nice kid. I shot a couple arrows. He doesn't hunt. He doesn't fish, which I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. He does play football, so I was like, that's all right. He's an Eagles fan, not a Steelers fan, but his dad's a Steelers fan. So I was like, I was honest with him. I was like, I'm on the fence about you. Okay. You're not into the outdoors. You like the wrong football team. Like, man, you're not starting off on a strong foot here,
Exactly. Yeah, dude, I tell you what, my daughter, she's 11 now, and I'm not far behind you.
Yeah.
I think right now she still feels that boys are icky. You know what I mean? Like, ew, gross boyfriend, that I know for a fact that'll start to change in the next couple of years. But I know how I used to be when I was a young man. And now having a daughter, the shoe's on the other foot. And now I want to like kill every boy that I see talking to her. Right. And so, I don't know if it was in a movie. I think it was in a movie, and the guy picks this kid picks this guy, the main character's daughter, up for prom, and he walks in the door, and he's just like, anything that you do to her tonight, I'm going to do to you the next time I see you. And I thought, dude, that's a cold line, man.
It is.
I think
that's a prison line.
Exactly. And so I'm just like, I think I don't know, like it's an unwritten law for fathers to want to cradle their daughters as long as possible and murder every single thing that attempts to communicate with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, man. It's funny. I try to remember like my father-in-law and I didn't get along for the longest. Like, so my wife and I have been together since we were 15, so we've known each other like pretty much all our life. And her dad did not like me at all, like hated me, And so, and even when we got a little older, into our 20s, even like prior, like right before us getting married and stuff like that, like it still wasn't a great relationship. So I try to keep that in my mind, where it's like it put a lot of undue stress on my wife, growing up, when we were dating and when we got engaged and stuff like that. It wasn't until like we had our daughter that he was like, I was wrong about you. You're
actually a decent dude.
You're a good guy and you're devoted and blah, 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 blah. But this is not a family therapy session. But before we move off from family, your daughter is a savage on the mats, dude. And
man.
Dude. And I loved watching like, her evolution just through the stories and stuff that you would post online and stuff like that, like watching her in tournament, watching all your kids, but like it seems like she's really taken to it. And, women's wrestling is just kind of exploding, and it's just super cool to see her as into it as she is, man. And she's good. It's like she got that pin with that tilt that one week. That was slick.
2 in 1 tournament.
Nice.
2 pins with a tilt in one tournament. And, I don't know what it is. She has a personality and the ability to focus that is different than my sons do. And I think it's what I'm learning is, obviously girls mature,
right?
Are like they're just able to rationalize things differently than boys. And my boy, dude, the house could be on fire and he'd ask, "Hey, can I watch TV?"
Right.
Like. And then my daughter, like, she thinks everything through. She's very calculated in what she does and says. And I think that transfers very well onto the wrestling mat. And she has surprised us in 2 ways. One, she's surprised us where she took on a new wrestling club this year. That is, and when I say intense, I mean, there's kids crying in practice because it gets that intense. A lot of live, tough wrestling that's harder than any match she has ever. Mm-hmm. And so she was able to handle that. But what impressed me the most is when I see her pull a move out on the wrestling mat, and I'm like, she picked it up. Like this tilt. I taught it to her in our basement. That's a pretty complex move for a first year wrestler, but it clicked for her, and she laid it down multiple times in multiple matches, and along with some other moves. And I was pretty jacked when it started clicking for her.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome, man. Like I said, I loved whenever when you posted those. As soon as I saw them, I think I messaged you right away, and I was like, "Dude, that's fire, bro!" Like,
I know.
Like for that age, like hitting tilts and stuff like that. Because, I mean, I was never great at tilts in general. Some people are just really, really good at them. It's part of their game. Mine was more of like a on your feet, take down, let up, and then and then ride tough. Essentially, was kind of like my game. Didn't have a lot of tilts. It was more, finesse on my feet, and then pain and discomfort on the mat. That was like that was my game. But I know what you're saying when you start to see your kids like pick certain things up, because Anna trains jiu-jitsu with me, and she'll roll with a bunch. I only maybe roll with her like once a week usually. Like we'll actually have a match, and then otherwise she rolls with like the men that I train with essentially. And I get like little reports from them of how she's doing, and they're like, "Dude, she's actually doing jiu-jitsu now." They're like, she's not just like flailing around, like she's actually caught my one buddy in like with a choi bar. And he's like, "Dude," he's like, "I didn't even know she knew that." And I was like, "Either did I." I was like, "She must have like watched somebody do it somewhere and picked it up." But it's cool. Hopefully, my daughter did not pick up from me the wrestling bug or the hunting bug. So hopefully that falls in line with your daughter, that it goes from like grappling to like, cool, I'm now going to be focused and really into hunting too for you.
Well, I bought a 410 for her last month.
Mm-hmm.
I got a red dot from Vortex on the on it, and I'm set, man. Like
Nice.
I am, and she's like, "Hey, set, Dad." Every day she's like, "Dad, what's the weather going to be Friday?" Because I'm pulling them out of school because this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is youth turkey season.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And so I'm pulling my oldest boy and my daughter out of school. My boy will come along for the ride. My daughter's the hunter in this scenario. And so they're both going to come. My stepdad's going to come with me. He's going to sit with my son way back and call. And I'll call, then I'll stop. And then the turkeys what I'm envisioning is the turkeys walk right in front of us to hit their call. And we get a shot opportunity.
Nice. That's awesome,
Yeah.
man.
Yep,
Yeah. I used to take Anna turkey hunting when she was really little, and she liked it. You know, the first couple times I took her, and then she just kind of fell out of interest for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I'm hoping like as she gets a little older, maybe she'll come back around to it. So I don't pressure her necessarily, because she loves being outside. Like you know what she would do? She would do a horseback elk hunt, I think, when she got old enough. Because she loves horses. Like that's what she does. Like aside from jiu-jitsu, like she rides horses like 3 days a week or whatever, takes horse riding lessons and stuff.
Yeah.
So anything I could involve horses with, she'd be like all about, you know. So maybe that's the ticket. Maybe like a Colorado backcountry type of horseback.
She doesn't like the simple whitetail turkey hunts. They have to be the most. Dad, how about a trip to Alaska?
yeah, she would totally be down for that, dude. Like so. Yeah, because she likes to travel too. So that's the one thing, you know, that she does like to travel. So it's like if it were like a travel trip somewhere that it was like an interesting place, like I think she'd be down for it. But speaking of interesting, dude, how was your 2023 season, man? I know you killed a hammer buck in Iowa, which is like I just kind of put it on my calendar now that, you know, it's like sometime in November, I'm going to see a post. It might not come easy, you know, on your end, of course, right? But I'm always like, I'm going to see a post at some point in November where Dan's got a killer buck on the ground.
Man, you know, I could sit here and just BS you and just be like, hey, dude, here's what I did. That was so difficult and hard. And I was I was hanging out of a saddle and like all this shit.
Right.
Dude, you do it. A lot of people do it. You scout a property. You find the good spots. And this is my second year on the property that I hunted. And then I have another property that I've been on for like 17 years now. And so you just know where they're moving around. You just have to micro tweak your setups a little bit every year, but the pinch points don't go away. The terrain doesn't change. Right. The only thing that I have to really take into consideration where I hunt is crop rotation, because they like different times of year. They like going to different food sources and other hunters. And so outside of that, it's not like when you do it, I have found success because I failed so many times before, and my success now comes with experience. So just like jiu-jitsu, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the opportunity to put someone in a specific move gets greater because you've seen and done those things several times before. Yeah. And so I credit my success right now just to the amount of years that I've been doing this.
Yeah. That totally makes sense, man, because there's no replacement for experience, you know. And I think like a lot of times you'll talk to younger hunters, and when I say younger, I'm not talking in age, because I know some guys. I just had a guy on the podcast, I think it was 2 weeks ago or something, Jacob Sklenner, young dude, but the dude is a killer. Like, and he's in his early 20s. But he's just one of those dudes where it's like he spends a lot of time in the woods, man. Like there's only one way to get it. Like you got to be out doing it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's funny that you mentioned that you say it that way, because I've kind of felt the same way. I'll never say that it gets easier, right? Like, cause it's always hard, right? Cause they're animals, right? They're going to do stuff that you don't expect, and things are going to go awry. But I almost feel like my decision-making process has become a lot clearer and a lot more when I do make the decision, it's with a lot more conviction now than it was maybe say 5 years ago. Does that ring a bell for you?
Yeah. In a way, yes. For me, it has, what's the hot topic now? Caitlin Clark, right? And how she makes it look easy. Yeah. Well, it's because she's practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and has honed her skills to the point where she is now, where she's just crushing it. Right. And so that is, in a way, what I've been doing, right? I don't scout as much as I used to because I can't, right? I don't hunt as much as I used to because I can't. And so what I've learned, especially over the last 5 years, has been that I have become way more efficient in how I hunt, as opposed to blanket coverage, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that 100% makes sense, dude. It's funny because I think it was Tony was on at one point, and we were kind of talking about scouting, and this, I think it was even like a year ago, because I kind of adopted that same philosophy, and it was out of need, and when I looked back on, last year and, having the success that I had, it was a lot of what you're talking about, where I couldn't scout a whole lot locally, I just didn't have the time. I had some family stuff coming up that I just could not get out as often as I typically would in general. And then, of course, the Kansas thing, it's like I've hunted there in the past, but it's not like I can scout or do any observation or anything like that until I get there. And so it was really just kind of relying on, knowing what I know to be true from experience and just basing my decisions off of that. And there was something about it too. I don't know if you feel this way or not, but for me, I almost feel like in the years past, looking back on it, that, and I'll never say that time in the woods is ever wasted, because that's how you learn, that's how you figure it out, and it's always, good to spend time out there. But I also feel like I didn't have the right perspective in those years to really get the benefit out of the time I was spending in the woods as much as I possibly could have, because it would often cloud my judgment to a degree, because I would have so much information, right? I would and so the past couple of years, because schedule just wouldn't allow that, I had to be much more focused on the areas I was going to scout and what I was looking for and stuff like that, to where I almost felt like it was more freeing, because I had a lot of historical knowledge or experience, but not a lot of in the moment, real time information. And so it was kind of freeing me up to actually just use my woodsmanship, as opposed to what's this piece of sign that just showed up? I didn't really care too much about that. I started more adopting the idea of hunting hot sign, you're almost a day late already, to a degree. And so I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, if it felt similarly.
Well, when it comes to sign, I don't know, man. Seeing a big rub is awesome. I take a picture of it. I go, ooh, that's a big buck who, made it. But man, I'm a terrain guy, man. Fresh sign doesn't mean much to me unless I watch the animal do it anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Just because I know these deer are going to go through this terrain feature at some point in a, let's just say a 72-hour window. Mm-hmm. For some reason, the number 3 popped up in my head, and the buck I shot in 2021 was on a 3-day cycle in the pre-rut, and I got him on multiple trail cameras. When I went and checked them, I pulled the SD card, checked them, I was like, okay, I got him here, and I got him here. How do I attack on the wind that I have the next time I'm going to hunt? Okay, south wind. I'm going to walk way into this pasture, cut 90 degrees in, and drop down into the timber. That's where I'm going to set up. And sure enough, he came right along that little knob / ridge, little, I don't know. It's it's not necessarily a ridge. It's like a ridge that stops all of a sudden and then flattens out towards a cornfield. And there's a good trail from historical knowledge that was on there. And it's just like putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah. It just seems like, and I guess that's just the benefit of age, right? And experience, is that you don't always have to see all the puzzle pieces. Like my wife loves doing puzzles, and it's like the first thing she does, and my daughter loves doing them too, is they'll dump all the puzzle pieces out and they flip them all over so they can see like the colors and and the shapes and stuff that are on them, so they can start piecing them together. And I kind of think about that sometimes when I'm hunting, because I feel like I used to have to be able to flip all those pieces over and see them, and I would even need to start to see some of them kind of come together, right?
Yeah.
And now I almost feel like, I don't even need to see all the pieces anymore.
Yeah.
It's like I can imagine what the pieces might be, and that's good enough for me at this point. And then I'll feel confident enough to make a move on that. I don't have to like know everything.
Yeah. Yeah. You listen to the old timers, and I'm talking about the guys who have been hunting for really long periods of time. I'm saying close to 40 years or something like that. You'll hear them say things like, "Oh, he'll be in there." Right? I'm not too concerned about it. He'll be in there. Yeah. Right. And then they go in there and then they kill the deer.
Sure.
Right?
Shit,
and so they don't have hardly any puzzle pieces. They just know because they've been hunting a long time.
Yeah. There's a particular deer that has piqued my interest for this year. And I was texting with a buddy about it. And I went and did some scouting last weekend to try to see if I could find his haunt in October, because he's a deer that I think I have him on camera from the year prior. And this is a new piece to me that I've hunted only for 3 years. And when I say I've hunted, I've scouted, hung cameras. And I think I have maybe a total of 5 hunts over the course of 3 years, because it's a couple hours from my house. So it's been like a long-term project for me to figure out. It's a big woods piece, like tens of thousands of acres. And there's a deer that's piqued my interest, and pretty sure I had him on camera last year, just like I think one picture, like late season, and then a couple of them this year during that same time frame. No clue where he's at in October, better part of November, right?
Yeah.
And I went and scouted last weekend, didn't find anything of note that would tell me that, that he's in an area during October, some areas I was checking out. And it's just, in years past, it would drive me kind of crazy, right? Yep. And this one, I was texting with a buddy of mine. I was like, I know where he wants to be in, starting late November into through like December. I was like, I'll just kill him when he wants to be killed. It's like, and so I'm not going to run myself ragged trying to figure out where he's at in October. I'm just going to let the deer tell me where and I think that's like the idea of what you're saying about the old timers. It's like, he'll be there. I just need to make sure I'm there when he's there. Like, he's going to he'll give you an opportunity if you just pay attention to what he wants to do.
Yeah. Once I've really slowed down to my approach, I think, and really what made me become more efficient is just kids, straight up. Right. Yeah. And so it's like, I still want to kill a buck. I can't spend 40 days out there like I used to. I gotta become more efficient. And that really just forced me to slow down, be more observant, and just go during the right time. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's pre-rut.
Yeah. What dates are those?
Let's see. So I'm going to say on the farms that I hunt, most years. Now, I ate my words last year when a giant showed up. I think it was like October 14th, 11th or 14th or something like that. That first big cold front that came through, and he stood up. That doesn't mean he's killable, but I had a cell cam in the middle of nowhere, and he showed up on it. And then after that picture, me nor the other guy on the farms saw him. Okay. Right. Well, I'm going to say on my farms, it's probably October 27th, usually. They're nocturnal until then. I'm getting pictures of them, but they're not killable because they're nocturnal. And so to November 5th, 4th or 5th. And, some people, their deer may go into rut earlier, but it's just the perfect time where it's like the does are they're not quite ready to be bred yet, and the bucks are ready to breed. Mm-hmm. When you have that scenario right there, there's deer running all over the place. These bucks, in my experience, they're hitting as many doe groups as they can in a single day to get downwind of them, see if somebody's in estrus. Nope, move on to the next one. I've seen it so many times before. And then when that first doe pops, then it has become harder for me to get on shooter caliber deer.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've never heard anybody kind of say it that way before, but it makes sense because everyone just always kind of refers to, bucks checking scrapes, making their rounds, that late kind of time frame, but everyone's always looking for, that first kind of hot doe, right, of the year. And for me, I have an area that I have one that comes in early, so it's always kind of like I get some fun hunting middle part of October every year because of that, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, it's always, and I actually never thought of it until you said it that way. I'm always trying to time it whenever I see this parade of bucks start to show up in this general area around this scrape area, because I know that doe is starting to warm up. And then I saw a fawn drop, so then I knew for sure that doe family had an early estrus state, and so I knew why it was happening. My hypothesis was correct. But the idea of timing it where the bucks are ready but the does aren't, like that is just like, that's like the perfect way to say it, right? Because I never really thought of it that way, man, because that's where you get all the guys showing up to the bar trying to find the one chick that's ready to party, and they all want to fight over it. You know what I mean?
Yep. And she's not ready to party.
She's not ready to party. No. She's, she's going to like have a glass of wine, maybe take a bath.
Talk to her sisters.
Yeah, exactly. That's cool, man. Do you find that, I was just curious in Iowa in general, like, do you find that that's a pretty consistent kind of time frame? Because I know for, going out to Kansas, like it feels like it's a little bit later than that, like just by like a couple of days, at least what I had seen,
My uncle, he used to live in Iowa. Now he lives in southeast Kansas. And he was telling me everything down here is a week later than up there. So I'm going to try to hunt Kansas this year. Nice. But he's been telling me, like, if you think it's hot November 7th, then November 21st or November 14th down here will be money. Money. So, which makes sense. The further south you get, the later the rut usually tends to be based off photo period. So, man, I don't know. Like, I just go with what my gut tells me a lot and what I've learned. It's like, okay, for me, I'm not a huge believer in hunting a early season cold front, like first 2 weeks of October, right? Especially if there's no real amount of precipitation that falls with it. I'm just not into it. I'm gonna be out of state on another hunt, or I'm gonna be doing some coaching responsibilities with my kids, right?
Right.
And so, but then when that pre-rut hits, that late October into the first week of November, you're gonna find me in the woods, man.
Right. Yeah. What talk to me a little bit about the cold front idea, because like everyone gets all jazzed up always about that first one, right? And I kind of fall in line with you. I'm always more of a believer that it gets a lot more fanfare than it probably should, because people are more excited to get out because it's the first cold front, right? And they're itching,
right?
As opposed to like there being, a reality behind that, middle of October, all of a sudden deer are all just miraculously going to get up and start moving.
Yeah. So, I got these statistics.
I was going to say, I saw you pull out a file. I was like, shit's about to get real here.
Yeah. Okay. So a while ago, it was October last year when that cold front came through, and I didn't hunt. So I put a poll out on my social media platforms, and I said, how many of you think hunting improves when there's an early season cold front? Okay. 70% said yes, they feel that it that it helps. Okay. Of those 70%, I asked, of the people who said yes, how many of you actually hunted this cold front? Of that 70%, only 30% of the people actually hunted that early season cold front. And then, let's see here. It was, how many of you actually went into, of that 30% that actually went hunting, only 20% of those people actually I believe it was actually only 20% of that 30% then
Right.
had success in the woods.
Right.
Right. And so, and then I forget the last question. I don't have it written down here. I just have the statistics 80-20. But I think what is there's a lot of talk about early season cold fronts. But if that cold front lands on a Tuesday or Wednesday, nobody, and that might have been the question. If this cold front landed on a weekend, would you use vacation time to go do that? And the answer was, I think it was like 20% of people said, only 20% of people said yes, they would.
Right. And that would be a group of people who had the availability or enough vacation time to allocate vacation time to that outside of like maybe the normal vacation they were taking to hunt, which might be in November or whatever the case is. Right.
Yeah. And so the whole point of that was me trying to prove that you may even believe that early season cold fronts play a role in deer movement, but nobody cares about them because it's not prime time yet.
Yeah.
And so, yes, they feel, but they don't know, like very few people take advantage of it.
Right. Right. I also think, so I'm always kind of torn. Like I like to hunt like an early season cold front for no other reason than like, for me, it's almost more nostalgia. Like it feels like hunting, right?
Oh yeah.
The temperature dropped, it's probably October 12th. So it's that first like true kind of hint that like it's getting close, you know what I mean? And so it's like, I'm getting excited, my hunting trips are coming up, there's a little dew, like the smell of fall, like it all starts to feel like it's getting right. You know what I mean? And that to me is probably more why I like to get out during those days. Now, do I think like a 20-degree temp drop on October 10th, 12th, whatever it is, even 5th, whatever it is, can get a deer up on his feet a couple minutes earlier and you might have a chance at him? Yeah. Sure, but you probably better be hunting close to where he's bedded to begin with. It's not like all of a sudden like you're 500 yards from where this deer that you're hunting is living, and all of a sudden that 20-degree temperature drop in October 5th is going to put him in front of your stand or in front of the tree that you're in. Like I don't think that that's the case. Do I think it can give you an extra 5 minutes you might need if you're sitting 70 yards off of his bed to get Sure, that's believable, but all of a sudden, like they're up running around, like no, I don't believe that, Yeah. I've just not seen it either. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you something that I found out this year that kind of opened my eyes. I don't know if it answered any questions, but what it did do is give me more information. And so I hung up multiple mock scrapes this year, using what's it called? The rope-a-dope system from Code Blue Scents, right? That comes with the rope and you put the preorbital gland on it. Other companies make them too. Right. But that's what I used. And so I ended up hanging multiple mock
scrapes.
Mock scrapes. Yeah, ropes. I didn't really mess around with the bottom of it. But dude, you want to talk about how to get deer in front of a trail camera for inventory, maybe even in a state that doesn't allow mineral or baiting. That stuff worked absolutely amazing. I got tons of trail camera pictures, not just of of certain bucks, but every single deer on that farm in that area came to investigate that rope. And I just so happened to have a trail camera pointed at it. And like what time of day the deer or the doe group stand up. And then usually right behind that is the young bucks. And I'm talking pre-rut now. Right. And then the big dogs, they still just, they know they can win in a fight. They know they don't even need to fight. They just come up out of you got some 2-year-old or 3-year-old chasing a doe. She's not ready. He comes in, he puts his ears back one time, postures up, and that 3-year-old runs away. And now that's when the game starts to get a little more serious.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man. I don't know if I did any mock scrapes last year. Like I've run them in the past and I've had success with getting inventory. You know, and I don't know, for me, I almost, once I start to get a beat on what's happening in an area, I don't use them as often. I usually use them a lot whenever I first get on to a spot or an area that I'm just not super familiar with. Maybe like the first year that I'm on a piece or whatever. Yeah. And I'll find some, community scrapes and stuff like that. But it's like, maybe there's an area that I'm like, man, this place looks right. There's a lot of deer sign here. There's a lot of trails that are kind of converging, but there's no scrape. Like, let me try to make a mock scrape here and just see if I can get them to stop. Like, there's one place, I think 2 years ago, I put one, and it was because there was a ton of cover and it looked like it would be great for the rut, right? And there was no scrapes in the area. I was seeing old historical rubs and rubs from the prior season and stuff like that. And it just felt like one of those things where it's like, man, there's a lot of deer I know that are going to be traveling through here, but like, I don't know exactly where they're going to stop, and there was like almost like a cedar thicket. It was like a small strip of cedar, and like they could come in on one side or they could be traveling on the other side. And I was like, I'm not going to put a camera on both sides. I was like, let me just throw a mock scrape here, kind of like where everything's kind of converging, and hang a camera and see if I can't get deer to just pass by and check this out so I can see who's in the area. And sure as shit, it worked, right? Because like a ton of travel, they're already in the area, so I wasn't trying to pull them to me. I was just trying to get them to like spend time in a location that I could get a photo to see who's like what bucks are around. And there's been a couple of decent bucks in there. It's like I've only ever hunted it in early season for does or whatever, but it might be a place worth investigating. But yeah, it's those mock scrapes, man, can be great, for gathering inventory. Is that kind of typically how you use them? Is just more so like inventory gathering?
Yeah, well, this year was the first year I seriously played around with them to try to get inventory. But I will say this: by the end of this year, all my pre-hung sets are going to have a mock scrape right in front of them within shooting range.
Nice, yeah.
That's
that's almost like the John Eberhart method to a degree.
Yeah.
Not that he's doing mock scrapes, but that fool sets up on a lot of times scrapes because he wants to be able to shoot to them.
Yeah.
And a lot of my setups are like that too. I will admit. Yeah.
One thing, as many times as I have seen or I have been in the woods during scraping times of year, right, which is pretty much all year for a whitetail, but really just being in the woods and observing, man, I don't think deer make as much sign as we think they do. Like a single buck, like, you walk on some of these field edges sometimes and there'll be scrape. I bet you that's like 4 different deer.
Oh yeah.
I don't think it's one buck just going bananas along a mile stretch of river bottom and just like turkey scratching everything up.
Right.
I don't think they make as much sign as we think they do.
I will agree with you because as much as I've hunted in and around scrapes, the number of deer that I've actually seen work them, I've rarely seen the same deer work the same scrape. Like if I've visibly seen him do it once. Or put it this way, some of them that I've hunted that I've had cameras on, I don't know that I've ever seen the same deer actually hit the scrape on camera and then actually watch him do it in real time, like while I was hunting there, even if I saw that deer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, so I think that you're right. I think that they don't hit them nearly as often as we think. I think they'll come through frequently. Well, when I say frequently, like take that with a grain of salt, but when they do come through, if they're passing through multiple times, I think they more so come through, nose up the licking branch real quick and just kind of meander along their way. They're just kind of
going to say that.
Yeah. They just kind of that. I've seen that more than anything where it's like, they just kind of, it's like a glancing blow, like where they don't stop for super long. They nose it. All right, cool. I'm going to keep going to wherever I was going. I've seen that way more often than I've seen them stop and paw the ground. And typically, and this falls in alignment with what I talked to the dudes from MSU Deer Lab about, talking about scrapes, was that it's typically those, by and large, like the 2-year-olds and some 3-year-olds. And the further you get up in age class, the less and less likely it is that those deer are actually working the scrapes.
Right.
And not that we were talking about it specifically, but it becomes less and less likely that those older deer are working those scrapes during daylight hours, just in general.
Right.
So, it's like those younger deer, they're just trying to figure shit out. So they're laying down sign, and the older ones are just kind of maybe coming through nose in the licking branch and kind of moving along. And maybe if they're real fired up, they make a scrape and piss in it and get fiery, but I think that those are more the exceptions. I think that they're doing it in very, I'm making this shit up now, but like I think that they probably are doing it more so in like key locations that are like,
I don't know,
heavy
how to traffic areas
that are just like a spot that's meaningful to them, or that's like in their core area, and that they definitely want to make sure that their presence is known, like those types of things, you know. Because if they have a 5 mile swath that they're traveling, like this big woods piece I hunt, like the one deer I was following and had an encounter with, I guess last year, he got killed this year, and he got killed 5 miles from where I had the encounter with him, right? And so it's like, I know he was laying down sign in the area that I was hunting him because I've watched him do it, and like he had some very distinguishable antler characteristics, so you could tell kind of like when he was making rubs, like which were his and which weren't. And you know, I don't believe he was laying down a ton of sign 5 miles away. You know what I mean? Because I'm catching him in this one particular area basically all year round, except for about a 3-week period of time that hits like in the middle of October, essentially. You know, and then when rut rolls around, he's kind of back. But yeah, so yeah, man, I think it's funny, dude. I think the more we think we know about them, the less we actually know about them.
Yeah, that's a fact, man. I think like anything, we try to make it way more complicated than it needs to be. When I just kind of, I don't think I'm smart enough to like catch up.
I was just going to say,
you know what I mean? Like to try to figure all the details out.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go in the woods. I'm going to sit in a tree where I think the deer are going to come by. If they don't come by over the course of, a day or two, then I'm going to go to a different spot, and I'm going to go into this rotation where of all the good spots that I have, I'm going to check my trail cameras. I'm going to add the pieces of the puzzle together. But it's really like, they have, like my life is less Legos. You've seen some of the Lego sets that they have now where it's like, oh, this one has 10,000 pieces and it's the it's the working Death Star, right? Yeah. And then I'm like the Lego set that is 0 to 2 years old, where it's like 4 giant blocks that you just stack on top of each other, and then that's
dude,
me.
Yeah, dude, I'm right there with you, man. Like that, and I don't know. I think that some of that is, getting older, having to be more efficient with our time, and reducing the complication. And I've kind of started saying it like this. We're both buddies with Jake Hofer. Like we've both known Jake for a long time. And we were chatting after I got back from Kansas, and we were talking about the hunt and stuff. And he just asked me, he kind of told him how it happened, how it all played out. And he's like, is it as simple as, find those does and where the, and then, and the bucks will be there, and my response was, I was like, for me it is, I was like, because I'm not smart enough to figure anything more than that out. You know what I mean? I was like, it's as simple as that. I was like, that deer got killed because he did one thing one time. And I just said, like, I'm just going to believe him. Like, that's what he's going to do. So I'm just going to believe that he's going to do it again, And I think that that's part of it, is like, it's the old saying, when you're dealing with people, right? Mm-hmm. When someone reveals to you who they are, believe them. You know what I mean? Don't give them another opportunity to do something bad to you or mistreat you or whatever. Believe who they are when they show you. Yeah. To me, it's like I've adopted the same thing with deer hunting, where it's like, when they show you who they are and what they want to do, believe them. Don't try to make it any more complicated than that. Like, they're creatures of habit. They're creatures of comfort. They want that comfort, that security. And so when they're doing something in an unpressured way, in a natural deer movement type of way, there's a reason why they're doing it. It's because they're comfortable. There's comfort in what they're doing. Yep. And so when they show you that, believe it, and don't try to make it more complicated than it really is. Like, if the deer is moving from point A to point B and you've seen him do it once and all conditions are going to be the same the following day or 2 days from now, believe that he'll do it again. You know what I mean? Like, and that to me has probably been more, I think what has kind of reduced like the stress of it a little bit, and has allowed me to be more efficient, more honed in, and actually feel more like I'm in the game more often, to be quite honest. Yep. If that makes sense.
Yep. It does, man. Yeah. It does. I just, the older I get, the less I care about it. Like, when I say care, I mean, I still love deer hunting. Yeah. I still love the pursuit of locating a big buck, moving in on him, all that stuff. I love that. But the the game has changed a little bit to the point where I'm starting to understand that hunting is not really my life. Like, I have a business that is centered around hunting in the outdoors, but just as I would a different job, sitting in a cubicle all day or working in a factory line, like, the older I get, the more I focus on my family. And if I'm focusing all my attention on my family, then it's going to suffer somewhere else. But I don't care because literally my favorite thing to do is just hang out with my kids. Like, that is my favorite thing to do. I don't care if I'm watching some dumbass YouTube show with them or I'm actually out in the woods, which is awesome too, because my kids are very interested. I told you about my, this upcoming youth season. My daughter is jacked. My son is jacked. My youngest son, he's pissed because he's still too young. He's only 6, right? And he can't sit still. He wouldn't be able, he'd be asking, talking too loud, just not quite there. I think what I'm going to do is take him out some morning and I'm going to see if I can't get a turkey to gobble for him. That's it, really.
Yep.
But he's not going to be hunting. He can't hold a gun quite yet. And so that, my friends, is what I'm focused on as far as, like, I'm not balls deep in it like I used to be.
Yeah. And dude, there's a level of comfort when you get to that point, I will say, because I've kind of hit the same point, where I love it. I still look forward to going out. I still can't wait to go out. I have a blast when I do, but I have a lot of easier time now. Like Anna has an equestrian competition, whatever it was, I think it was last year, it was one of those days where it's like, there was a little precip, there was a little temp drop, dates were starting to get right. And she had an equestrian competition at, I think it started at like noon or something like that. And, so I went out and I hunted the morning, but it was one of those days where it's like everything was right. And this place that I was hunting was like, it's hard to get into. It's a little bit of a hike. And so it's one of those places like when you get in, like you probably want to sit all day, even in like mid-October. Yeah. And so I was like, she's like, "Are you coming, Dad?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm coming." And I was like, "I'll be there." And so I went and hunted in the morning and I ended up seeing a really good buck that morning, and a couple other deer like moving, well after, daybreak. And so it was just one, and everything was right. The wind was right. It was one of those days where it was like, man, if I sit here, shit could probably be pretty good today. But I had other obligations and I was happy to get down, and I just jumped down whenever my timer went off, where I was like, all right, I got to leave because I got to hike out and whatever, and got down and went and did the equestrian competition and had a blast doing it. And, and I wouldn't have given up that watching her do the things she really likes to do to spend another 5 or 6 hours sitting in a tree.
Exactly.
And there's a level of like peace and comfort and that you just enjoy the process of the game and not so much put so much emphasis on the end of the game of filling the tag necessarily. It's like it just becomes the chess match, I guess, is the part that you really start to grow to enjoy, and not just filling to the tag. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%, man. I feel you.
Like I almost feel like sometimes when you fill that tag, like there's a part of me that, especially if like it's a deer you're after, like when the chase is over, you're kind of like, I'm not going to see that deer again. It kind of bums me out a little bit, where I'm like, the game has been played over the course of 2 years. I look forward to seeing this deer on camera every year and like knowing that the chess match is starting again. And then when the tag's finally filled and he's down, you're kind of like, I don't want to say let down, but you're kind of like, man, like like the end goal, the ending of it never, I don't want to say never, but sometimes doesn't live up to like the process that you took to get there.
Yeah. 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 I'm watching a show right now called Shogun. It's basically a Japanese version from like the 1600s or even earlier than that, where it's kind of a Game of Thrones type of show where it's just a battle for power. Okay. Well, in this show, there's this young guy, and he's like, I want to go to battle. I want the glory of going to battle. And I want, and like, he's just fired up to go into battle, and he wants to kill his enemies, and he's just all gung ho. And his father is like 60, 55, 60 in the show is like, when you've seen as many battles as I have, you'll understand that your excitement, is
Doesn't
a
make
waste
any
of
sense.
time. It doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
And so it kind of clicked to me the other night. I was like, hey man, that's kind of like me, how I used to be. I want to get in the woods. I want to hunt every single day. And I want to, I never really liked, sitting all day long, but I want to hunt every single day, morning, night, make moves, different wind direction, blah, blah, blah. And now I'm just like, I'm like, I'll go, I guess. I'll go,
Right.
oh, yeah, okay, there's a football game on. Yeah. Oh, you're making a pot of chili? Yeah, that's a reason for me to stay home,
Right.
I don't, but in that same show, it's like, then when the older one gets his father gets challenged, he's like, now it's time to slay, right? And so that's like me. I just sit back, I wait and relax, and then it's wham, hit the woods and become the predator that we all are. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great way to kind of think about it, man. Because that's I thinking about even 10 years ago. Like even just that recent, right? Of being, and I think part of it too is, when you don't know any better, sometimes you're trying to prove yourself a little bit. And you see this everywhere, right? You see it, you'll see it, in the wrestling room with your kids, as they kind of continue to like progress, get older and stuff like that. You see it in the jiu-jitsu room where, new guys come in and they're really just trying to prove themselves to like the more advanced guys, that they're going to stick around or they're tough or whatever. And I feel like it's the same thing, like in, bow hunting, like to a degree, it's like, we're trying to make sure, to a degree, trying to show, like our peers, our colleagues, our friends that, hey, I'm dedicated too, you know what I mean? And I don't know that we necessarily need to. I think we do get to a point to where, like, to what you're saying, it's like, when it's time to let it rip, you know what I mean? I'm going to let it rip, but like, until it's time to let it rip, I'm not going to waste my time doing it.
That's why all these dudes are planting food plots and doing habitat work, right? It's to just make sure that deer are there when they get the itch to hunt, right?
Yeah.
And I understand habitat work is a lot of work.
Yes.
It's work, right?
Yeah.
It's not hunting, in my opinion. It's work. And so you are stacking all of the cards in the deck in your favor by doing habitat work, or at least you're trying to do that. And then food plot comes out and the deer are there because you've done all this outside of the season work. And then you're just like, okay, well, he's on cell cam or like what this example that I'm diving deeper into just makes hunting sound not fun.
Right.
Right. I'm not trying. Hunting is still fun for me. But that's why people do some of these things. And it's to make hunting easier for them so they can go in whenever they have the opportunity and get the job done.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, it's the scouting in the off season, but the way I've kind of changed it is, like you were saying earlier, I used to kind of go in and it was just, going to canvas stuff. Right. And, I'll still walk a fair amount of miles, but now before I go in, I usually have a very specific kind of thing I'm trying to do like that day, where it's like, I'm trying to find these types of things and I'm going to be looking in this area. And I don't spend a lot of time. Like if I go into an area and I don't see what I want to see relatively quickly, it's like, I'm out. Like I'm not spending more time there trying to uncover every stone. It's like, I'd rather move on to another area that shows me, again, it's that idea of when something shows itself to you, believe it, right? If it doesn't show me with the thing that I'm looking for, I'm going to believe that it's not there and I'm not going to second guess it. I'm just going to leave and I'm going to go to another area. And if it does show me what I'm looking for, I'm going to believe this is the right spot. And then I'll spend a little bit more time there, and so it's just being efficient with your time. But speaking of efficiency with time, dude, what's on your slate for this year?
Man, I just applied for South Dakota again. Sometime this week, I got to apply for Kansas. Got to buy my preference points for Wyoming. And, depending on how everything falls, there might be Oklahoma trip in there.
Nice.
But I don't know yet. Because as you know, and as we've already discussed, like I can't I am responsible for getting kids to practices. I've made it a point to help coach several of their teams. And so those are my kind of priorities right now. And so I'm kind of back down to just one out of state trip a year. And usually that's been to South Dakota. Now, I don't know what's going to happen if I draw South Dakota and Kansas this year. It's going to be like 2 very short trips probably. I mean, I'm talking 4-day hunt, 4 or 5 day hunts.
Right.
And, I probably won't travel as far into South Dakota as I would have if I go, if it's just a sole 8-day trip.
Right.
I usually go drive on a Sunday, or drive on a Friday, hunt Saturday through Saturday, and then drive on a Sunday again. And so, I don't know, man, it's always kind of up in the air, but I'll say this, it's always up in the air, but if it's not on the calendar by a certain time, the hunt won't happen.
Right. What's that kind of break point for you? Like cutoff point?
Really, man, it's not, you want to talk about quote unquote hunting for a living. This decision's not up to me.
Right.
The decision if I go on another out of state hunt is not up to me. It's up to the mood of my wife.
Right.
It's up to how many events do we have going on in a certain week. Right. Is there games, a lot of now my kids are all in activities, and a lot of times I have one kid that has to be here and another kid has to be here, and sometimes third time. And so we're either relying on somebody else to help us get our kids there, or we're dividing and conquering all of this stuff. And so who knows, dude?
Who knows?
Right? Who knows? Yeah.
Nice. The Wyoming one, what's that? Is that a mule deer hunt? Potentially?
Well, I'm buying preference points now. So I'm thinking about doing an antelope hunt.
Okay.
In this August, September timeframe, but I'm not 100% sure of if that's going to happen. I might just buy a preference point. I'm sitting on a very good amount of elk points for Wyoming. I'm sitting on a good amount of deer points. I have a really good amount of antelope points. So those 3 animals right there are kind of what I'm looking for as far as Wyoming is concerned. I just have to find the time to go do it. And I'm debating on whether or not, there's no elk in Iowa. There's no antelope in Iowa. There's no mule deer in Iowa. Okay. So I have this opportunity that I've collected these preference points for a very long time. And I want to make sure that when I go and pull the trigger on these trips, that they're done right. They're thought out, and it's just not, I'm going to go apply for this unit. Well, I'm going to try use my contacts throughout that I've made over the years, whether they're in the industry or not, talk about best times to go. I'm going to, I'm even going to debate whether or not I not necessarily an outfitter, but try to find a guide to go with on some of these hunts, just because of just from the straight up fact that I want to make sure that I do this and do it well. And I guess I'm okay with spending a little bit of money, a little bit more money on it, because more than likely it's going to be a once in a lifetime type of opportunity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've invested how much into it already. It's like, why not give yourself the best chance? I'm accruing a bunch of points in a bunch of different Western states for a bunch of different species, the same. But this year will just be, I'm back in Idaho this year for an elk hunt, middle of September, and then PA, and then Missouri, which is nice because that's over the counter, and so I can kind of make that decision last minute depending on how things are panning out with that deer that I'm kind of chasing in Pennsylvania. Yeah. But dude, a couple more things before we shut this thing down, dude. So I wanted to get your perspective, because you've been, and we were talking about this before we started recording. I think obviously you've been hunting a long time. We know a lot of guys who've been hunting a long time. And I'm sure a lot of guys that listen to all the podcasts you have on your network and this show have been hunting a long time too. But the one unique thing that perspective that you have is that, even before you had the network and before you had Nine Fingers Chronicles, like you were already kind of in the hunting media space even prior to that. And so you've seen hunting kind of evolve, not just from a hunter side, but also from just like the media side or the industry kind of side of things. And so how, in your opinion, just like broad strokes view, how has hunting changed over like the past 10, 15 years, or as long as you've been kind of in the game, so to speak, like at least from your opinion, like in your opinion, how have things evolved?
I mean, that's kind of a loaded question because there's good things that have come out of this, and there's bad things, obviously, or negative things that have come out of this. I'll start with good. Okay. One thing that I believe has about the evolution of media is back in the day, there was the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. There was the, all these different, the NWTF, the QDMA back in the day. Now it's the NDA. And so there's all of these places out there that they had a good voice, but some of the great things that these organizations were doing never really made it to the average Joe of the world, unless you were directly involved in the organizations. And so as technology has evolved, as social media, YouTube platforms have expanded, the voice of these conservation organizations really have been able to voice their message to a broader audience and allow people to hear some of the research, like the Mississippi State Deer Lab and the research that these guys do kind of opens up the truth about the biology of deer, right? As opposed to back in the day when we were just all huddled around print ads and the outdoor channel. Like, I don't feel like, and even to this day on the bigger platforms, conservation doesn't have a very good voice. No. Like, they don't make it a priority to talk about any of these organizations, when in my opinion, that's also the downfall, right? Part of the negative thing is we have these people with these huge platforms and they're not saying a dang thing about conservation. Now, they would argue with me that they are doing it. But my idea of conservation and their idea of conservation are two completely different things, right? I can't just go, hey, I bought a hunting license. I'm a conservationist. Right. Sorry, buddy. That's not how it works, right? And so what have you done to sacrifice your own time for the greater cause? You don't see a lot of people doing that. And even every year I struggle with trying to find time I'm just lucky that I have this platform where I can do two things at once. I can promote a message for a conservation organization, and at the same time, do my job. And so I feel like I'm doing both. But man, I don't know. And then even in this world of how things operate, right? You start to find out some of these conservation organizations, and I'm not going to say a name. I'm saying what's in my brain right now. And so you have these conservation organizations that how much money is actually going back to any type of conservation work, right? A lot of, some money, and this is for all organizations that are, like 501(c) or C3 or whatever that is, right? It's, hey man, we have to make enough money in order to keep our jobs. And then the rest goes to conservation. And so, I don't know. That's probably me going off in a direction I don't want to go into, but there's truth in that. I mean, no matter what you're looking at, like any charity organization, like, you'll see, that's why there's good nonprofits to give to, like charity organizations to give to, whether they're hunting related or not. And then there's ones that aren't as good, right? And like what it comes down to is like a lot of the ones, that's why you never give anything to an entity. I don't want to say never, but like most often you shouldn't, if you're going to donate to charity of some sort, it shouldn't be like a government run organization. Why? Because there's so much bureaucracy included with it that 10 cents for every dollar that's donated actually makes its way to actually helping the thing you're trying to help. Right. And there's a lot better, smaller organizations that more of your money actually goes to the thing that you're trying to support. Right. Right. And so there's good and bad there. The cool thing about YouTube, because it used to be just television, right? I remember watching bass fishing on ESPN or even some hunting shows on ESPN on Saturday mornings when I was a kid. For me, it really was. I watched some cartoons, but I just was enamored by some of these Bassmaster tournaments and these guys like pulling these slabs out of the water. But outside of that, man, if back in the day, I only thought you could kill big deer over food plots or go to an outfitter, right? I knew there was deer running around, but I didn't know that you could just go out into the woods and hunt deer.
Right.
So the truth about hunting has been exposed, both good and bad as well. And so it's a yin and yang thing, man. I mean, for all of the good things that the evolution of the industry or media or technology has allowed us to do, there's negative aspects of it as well. And so what really creeps me out is the advancement of all this technology, and we are applying it to hunting to make it easier. And then all of a sudden it's going to be more video game and less actual hunting. And so I have my own thoughts on the direction of hunting, and it's kind of outside the box, I feel, because I don't agree a lot with the direction of hunting rules and regulations in a couple states, and people who bitch but don't do anything. That's the biggest pet peeve of mine, is people who bitch and complain, but they don't talk to anybody about it. They just bitch, or they don't take any action themselves to change what the problem is. And so I don't know, man. This is a conversation that it's almost like it's turned into, hey, you have to choose sides, right?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. I was thinking that, right? Where, and that's not just hunting. That feels like it's like that with everything, where you can't have a measured thought about something that gives validity to both sides, where you can see why a person would think one way, and you can also see why a person would think another way, right? Because that's how solutions actually happen, is that you have to have people who are open-minded enough and adult enough to go, I may not agree with what you think, right? But I want to understand it, right? And then, okay, I still don't agree, but I understand how you could get there, right? It's like, so now let me explain my side, right? And if that other person can go, I may not agree, but I can understand how you got there, right? Okay, now we've got a place by which we can start to actually figure out like what are like reasonable compromises, and what are some things that, like, look, I get this thing is really important to you, and I don't necessarily agree with you, right? But I can understand why it's important to you, or people like you, right? So what can I do to make you feel better, right? Because this thing isn't that important to me, right? And so you start to go through that and prioritize things, but you have to have like a general kind of like understanding of how each other is thinking and why you both think the way you do, right? And that's where like the negotiation or the compromise starts. Like, but so many times it becomes, I'm right, you're wrong, or I don't like what you're saying, so I'm not listening. You know what I mean? And that's just, I mean, you're doomed to basically give the results over to whomever basically begins in the power position. You know what I mean? And unfortunately for hunting, we're often not in the power position, like generally speaking, right? Because we're a smaller group, not as well funded. Just when you think about mainstream things and stuff like that, depending on what hunting is up against. Yeah. In the interests, like the interests with money, essentially, because that's how things kind of that's how things often shake out.
100%, man. Money is a driver in all things in life. And, one thing I mean, back in the day, I went to a ATA show, and all the brands were there, right? You've been to an ATA show. All the brands were there. Everybody's talking about their products, all this stuff. Well, nobody's talking about at this show. Nobody's talking about the actual natural resource that we use all these products on. Right. And so the whole conversation at the at the time was, here's my products. Let's make money off of this. And you don't see even the companies doing very much to give back to the natural resource that they rely on to make their money. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I bitched and complained about it. If it was me, awesome. It worked. But if it wasn't, then, the message, someone else heard a message. I'm not saying I'm responsible for it anyway.
Right.
But the next year, conservation organizations had space available to them on the floor of the ATA show. And I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, that's
because it allows them to get in there when everybody's so focused on products. And I understand you got to make a business, but you're relying on a natural resource that is pretty fragile when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but they're relying on selling products to people whose natural consequence is going to be the extraction of that natural resource. Right. Like that's what they're trying to do. It's like, cause they ain't selling the product to say, hey, this will never help you do anything. You know what I mean? They're selling the product going, you use this and these are the ways that it's going to help you kill that big buck you're trying to kill. Right.
Yeah.
And that big buck idea is also a little bit of a, iffy area just around, the focus on killing big deer, and not just the process of the hunt and like all the things that, hunting can do, or the benefits of it aside from filling that end tag, right? And just being enamored with antlers. I think that also sends a bad message, especially for new hunters, right? Because they feel like that 80-inch buck in PA isn't worth anything because everybody they're seeing post stuff on social media is talking about killing giants, Yeah. And they've been hunting for 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, or maybe it's their first buck or whatever. Even if it's not, maybe they've been hunting for 20 years. It's like, who gives a shit, And the idea being that, hunt your own hunt and enjoy the successes that you're having and the experiences that you're having. Like, doesn't matter what other people are doing, and, and I think it's easier said than done to be able to filter that stuff out. And maybe that comes over time, where you stop caring as you get older, like what other people think about what you're doing or whatever the case is. Like you and I, we have less time to care. So I don't, what I mean? But it's hard to tell that young person who, like we were saying earlier, trying to make their mark or trying to prove that like they're committed or whatever the case is, right? It's hard to tell them that like other people's opinions don't matter. And of course, most people don't care, but you always get those, it's the few that are the chirpy assholes that, make that person feel bad or, diminish what they've accomplished. So,
yeah. The next thing is like, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Pretty simple question. Do you like big antlered deer?
Yes.
Yes. I do too. I love it. That's why we go out and do what we do. But the big antlered deer, especially in states like Iowa with low public ground, is going to be the death of deer hunting in states with low public land. And so I'm watching it happen right now, right? And so if you're serious about it, if you lose a piece of private property and you still want to be a hunter, you're going to go have a different experience, but you're still going to be able to hunt on the very small amount of public land that's available to us. But what we're seeing is money is dictating everything. There is such a need for big antlered deer, the demand for big antlered deer that, and I've almost feel like I've beat this to death on my podcast, and hunters themselves, whether they're using an outfitter or whether they're leasing land or whether they're buying large amounts of land, the average hunter is requiring more acres to do what they do on. So let's say there's 10 of us on 1,000 acres, right? So that's everybody roughly has 100 acres to go to. Well, in a trickle effect, one guy is going, hey, I want to buy that farm. Now that hunter's getting displaced, and now this one guy has 200 acres. Well, I want to buy this farm too. Okay, well, now this one guy has sole access to 300 acres. And then what you're seeing is this snowball effect where other people are coming into all this other one, and the amount of acres for a single hunter is going up thus displacing other hunters to go find more land, and it's all getting crunched down. So on one side of the scale, we have the experience for someone having a really, really good experience on the land because, bigger bucks come with age. And then on the other end, everybody else's experience is getting worse because they're running into more people. And there's arguments to say what I'm saying is bullshit. Like, oh, dude, you just go out in public and go find new deer and knock on doors and be active and do it. Yeah, that's great, man. Until you can't do that anymore.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's all fine and well. Which those are solutions. Right.
Right.
But you also have to take into consideration, you're somewhat to a degree, I don't want to say governing, but like you take you and I, for example, right? Or just take me, right? Hunt public land around me. And I could go knock on doors and things of that nature. But if a guy is not as into hunting as I am, say they're a person who likes to hunt, but not like in love with it, like you and I are, right? Where it's like, I'll figure out a way to hunt like in some way, shape or form, because that's just what I like to do. Right. But the people like you and I are like a small group, right? Like that's a smaller subset of the overall hunter population, and just say deer hunter population, because it's, what you and I talk a lot about. There's a larger group of people that are people who just like to go out and hunt. And if there's a ton of barrier to entry for them, even if they've been hunting for a while, they'll just stop. It's the same reason why when you see guys get older, they just stop. It's like, well, I lost this farm over here that Joe used to own that he used to let me hunt. And I've been hunting it for 20 years and like he sold it and I don't have a place to hunt now. Right. Yeah. Like that guy's not starting over, like he's never hunted public land in his life. And maybe he's never really knew how to scout to begin with. Right. But he was still a hunter and he went out to this farm and he sat the same tree stand and he was still like part of the tribe. Right. Like still buying a license every year, still buying products every year. That guy now is gone, right? Because he's just like, I'm not going to put all that work in. Like, it's not that important to me, right? And someone like in my boat, that if it got terrible, and it gets worse and worse and worse, it's like, I just don't have the time. A guy may not have the time with wife, kids, career to go out and say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to spend a bunch of extra time trying to like give myself an experience that's like adequate, not even great, just adequate, right? It's like, well, is the return on that really worth the effort? And could I be spending my time with my kids, or could I be working a freelance job to make more money so I can retire earlier, or whatever the case is, right? Like these are real decisions that you have to make, And so, I mean, I think what you're saying, like, I agree 100%, right? Like you start to get those people who are on the fringe that we rely on, that are just a larger number of people than like the diehards that we rely on. Like those are the people who are at risk. It's not you and I, it's the fringe folks that make up a huge number of hunters that are the ones that are the most at risk of losing, essentially.
Yeah. Yep. 100%. And then, imagine it, I'm just saying, hunter numbers, I don't know. It's like some people think that there's too many hunters, which could possibly be. If the direction that we're going, there's definitely going to be too many hunters for the access that's available on the property. And my experience is just coming from Iowa, right? We have lower hunter numbers than Pennsylvania and Michigan and New York, but we also have less than 2% public land in the state. And we also have, as far as Iowa is concerned, hunting north of Interstate 80 there's options there, but a majority of Iowa is agriculture, right? And so everything you see as far as big bucks coming out of Iowa, for the most part, a very high percentage of that is south of Interstate 80. And I mean, we're talking, man, I want to say like, it's probably as close to 50-50, like 50% of the landscape holds deer on Iowa, Iowa. And the rest is just farmed to the black dirt and there's nothing lives on it. Okay?
Right.
And so I don't know, man, it's I'm just watching the direction that everything is going. And maybe I'm a pessimist at heart, but the direction that everything is going is leading to this becoming a rich man's game, or like a pay to play type scenario. And although I want to shoot big deer, I want my kids to be able to hunt when they're my age, And so at some point, there is going to need to be some kind of sacrifice of access or time or even big bucks. That's going to have to lose its meaning, or the antler needs to be devalued at some point in order for hunting to continue to get out of this path down, this downward trend, if any of that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think so, being able to do the traveling and stuff that I've been able to do to hunt, over the years, I've been able to go to some places that were, have good hunting and we'll just say like good, like adequate hunter numbers, right? Where it's like, there's not a ton of pressure. And this coming from Pennsylvania, it has a ton of pressure. So I could see the difference, right? Between several years ago when I came to Iowa, right? But I have, you live there, a buddy of mine. I have another buddy who lives out there, this fella Corey, who hunts the same piece of public that I was hunting. And so I'm always able to kind of keep tabs on that piece because he'll send me trail camera pictures of what's around. And, that way whenever I get ready to come back out, like I kind of have an idea. And I was just talking to him, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, I think. And this piece is a decent chunk that I hunted. And I think when I was out there, I think I saw him in the parking lot. And I saw one other guy in the woods, this old guy, George from Kentucky. Actually, George texted me out of the blue like 3 weeks ago too, which is kind of funny. Just an old dude I met in the woods. Like we actually crossed paths in the woods. Those were the only two guys that I saw the whole time when I was there for like 16 days. That one was in a parking lot and one was legitimately, I saw him in the woods. Like we crossed paths, right? And for a guy from Pennsylvania, that was like, man, this is great because like that running into a guy in the woods thing happens almost every time I'm out, right? Now, talking to Corey like 2 weeks ago, we were just BSing about hunting and this, that, the other, and swapping some pictures and stuff. And he killed a good buck this past year. And he said, man, he was like, when you coming back out? And I was like, I told him my plans were, when I'm going to draw again for Iowa. And he was like, dude, he's like, that piece of public, man. He was like, I've never seen pressure on it like I saw last year. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, I was running in to hunters, not just in the parking lot. He's like, I was seeing hunters like in the woods, like a lot. And now he's hunted this piece of public all his life, like, cause he grew up by it. Like, and Corey's in his mid 30s, I think. So he's been hunting that area for close to 20 years, and he's like, I've never seen people in there like I saw this year. He's like, not just that, like I would drive up and down around this piece. I would rarely see a truck pulled off near it. Like, and it's a pretty decent sized piece. There's a lot of different places one could park. No, I'd see trucks every now and then, but like, sparse. Yeah. He was like, man, he's like, every place there was to park, he was like, there was a truck pulled off. He was like, and I was seeing people in the woods, and I was like, and Corey's a good hunter. Like he's going back kind of far, especially if he knows he's got a good deer somewhere. He's like, I'm not just seeing people like at the top of the trailhead, dude. He's like, I'm seeing people like 2 miles back, like where I'm going to like hunt places I've never seen a person before. I'm walking in and there's a guy in a tree stand, and he's like, he's like, I'm switching my strategy up. He's like, I'm actually hunting closer to like the parking lots now than I was in the past because, deer getting displaced and like there's just a lot of people that have gone deeper. And so I think a lot of people that haven't hunted some of these places hear of these things and they think, because I think when someone talks about it from the perspective of like an Iowa or a Kansas or something like that, if they're from PA, like I think the natural reaction is, like, well, they don't know pressure, like come to PA, but it's like, yeah, but we've got a lot of public land around here. You know what I mean? Like, and so, yeah, we might still have a lot of hunter pressure. I get it. But when you start to see that in places like Iowa and Kansas and place like that you have to draw a tag for, like two things are happening. The hunter numbers are either going up, which there could be more resident hunters. That's possible, right? Because those places limit non-residents, right? So all those tags are usually filled up, like for those types of states, regardless, because it's a limited draw. Or the land is shrinking, so there's not more hunters necessarily. It's just more hunters being displaced from private areas that they used to have access to that are now, moving on to public. Yeah. And then there's also the the public effect of people hunting public and having success. And so it's become a little bit more of a, like a stamp of a badge of honor to a degree or whatever, or cool or whatever, when it used to not be cool or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
You know, so I think there's a couple things that are happening, but to your point, all that kind of goes to the idea of like decreasing the experience or change. I shouldn't say decreasing, depends on what your perspective is, but certainly changes the experience that you're having in those places.
Yeah. Yeah. On top of that, you know, you got all these crazy ass laws in, I don't know, certain states where, I don't know, like, hey man, I think that banning dogs, you know, like we should ban dogs, predator hunting with hounds, or like you can't use hounds to shoot bear or mountain lion or whatever, you just name it. There's someone out there trying to stop something.
Right.
And someone smarter than me said that, you know, like if your brother, and what I don't mean like me and you, we're right. Hunting brothers, right? And so if you like hunting with dogs and I don't give a shit that a law's coming up to ban it, they're coming for it all. Mm-hmm. They're coming for all of it. And when you have a group of people over here who are only interested in money and all this stuff, and then you have a group of people over here who are only interested in stopping what you're doing, then that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. It's definitely I don't know. I think the more I look at things, and I'm not usually a conspiracy theorist isn't the right word, but I am a pessimist by nature. Like, you know, yeah. I don't say I'm a pessimist. I say I'm a pragmatist. Like I'm pragmatic, okay. Right? I see things for what they are, and going back to what I said earlier, and I believe them, right? Until something, you know, proves me different or shows me different.
Right.
And I think a lot of things that just go on in the world in general, I don't think that they're inherently worse than they've been in the past. I just think we're a lot more aware of them or more acutely aware of them, right?
Right.
But I do feel like, you know, in hunting, it does feel like there's an inflection point. Like we're at an inflection point where things are going to change, and it might not seem like rapidly because it might happen over the course of the 5 to 10 years, but like in the grand scheme of things, that's quick. You know what I mean? But I feel like we're at an inflection point that like there are going to be changes, realizations, understandings, et cetera, that are going to happen in the not so distant future that are going to really change the shape of hunting and what it looks like for the everyday person. You know, you just hope that we have the right people at the steering wheel to kind of help navigate those things. So we end up in an area where we are, I don't want to say taken care of, but are well represented, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
I just hope that at some point people realize that, I mean, this is life, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody is so concerned about me, myself, and I. And people walk around every day with blinders on, and they're not aware of what's going on, nor do they care until the thing that they love the most is gone. Yeah. And, I can't do that anymore. I can't do this. I can't do that. Yeah, man, we tried to tell you, and you didn't do anything about it, and now it's gone. And so we're definitely at a point where eyes need to be open, and people need to care about, I mean, this is a life lesson. You know, treat others like you would want to be treated, and the focus needs to be on others and not ourselves, which I'm guilty of as well, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all guilty of it at different points, but I think the awareness, like when you're aware that, like, because I'm the same way. It's like I can be selfish about things, you know what I mean? Especially if I'm out hunting somewhere and I'm like, damn it, man, like there's freaking people all over the place. Like, you know what I mean? Like it definitely rubs me the wrong way in that moment, right? Because like I'm having a bad experience at that moment. But when I get some separation from it, I can think about it and be like, man, that guy has every right to be there as much as I do. And he's probably having the same negative experience that I'm having, right? Like, what is the solution here? Like, how do we fix this, right? Like, not just how do I change my experience, but like, how do we look at it from the whole, you know what I mean? So, well, brother, I've kept you on here almost an hour and a half, dude. I don't want you to miss all of breakfast time. And
no, it's too late. It's too late. I just heard the garage door open and then the garage door close, which means it's snowing in Iowa right now, by the way. And so my wife has the kids in the car. She's down at the bus stop. And so she's done everything this morning, and we'll just check her temperature when she gets home,
Right. Awesome, man. Well, hey, buddy, I always appreciate you coming on. Before you get out of here, let people know where they can find out more about what you have going on and just follow along with all the killer stuff that you have going on with the network.
Yeah, man. The best thing to do is just go to the Sportsman's Empire, SPORTSMENS, Sportsman's Empire. And I think we're sitting on somewhere like 25 different podcasts on the network, along with, I think, 3 are in the hopper right now that are going to be launched within the next couple months. And so what I personally like is that I vet every podcast that comes on the network. It's not like, hey, I want to be on your network. Your podcast sucks, but my podcast sucks, but I want to be on your network. Mm-hmm. I vet all of them. And so every host, all the content that comes out of there it's vetted, and it's done very, very well. And I'm pretty proud of all these guys that are on the network. And, we all kind of work together to see not only individual success, but the success of all the podcasts on the network. And so I'm really happy with that.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you, man. And, keep up the good fight, dude. Like, you're doing a killer job. I'm glad to know you as a friend, and glad to have an ally like you, doing the things that you're doing and bringing awareness to the things that you bring awareness to. And, hopefully one of these days we'll see each other face to face, run into each other. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Hey, we did meet one time at an ATA show.
We did. Yes,
we did. But other than that, dude, how many people I know in this industry that have just been this type of communication? Like, I've never met them in person, but I feel like I know them. So.
Yeah, exactly, man. So one of these days, dude, we'll make it happen. Definitely the next time I'm out hunting in Iowa. I passed through on my way back from Kansas, but I didn't have time to see everybody I wanted to see. I spent like 2 days in Iowa. And the thought crossed my mind, but I was like, man, I'm already run ragged. I just got to get out of here and get home, But so hopefully the next time is a longer trip, and you and I can link up, maybe throw one back, hang out, and I don't know, maybe we'll have too many beers and we'll grapple a little bit or something.
That's funny.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, have a good rest of your morning, brother. I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
All right, take care, man.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. And before I shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Osseo Gear, Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, and Genesee Beer. And until next time, we'll see y'all.